got to introduce myself now. So I'm going to actually just introduce my collaborators, and I will switch the light off. But first, I just wanted to give you the context. Rena and Elizabeth both can't join us here today, but they have been really key to the work that we've been doing. So they are in the room with us. But I also wanted to just contextualize Bathurst for those of you who are not familiar with the surrounding land uses. According to Census 2011, about 7,000 people live in Bathurst, and it's surrounded by three main land use types, and I will demonstrate. Okay, so this is private and ECPTA nature reserves. Pineapple farming. I know Alistair just loves pineapple farming. And this represents stock farming. There are some goats, there are some cattle. Cattle are very important culturally, spiritually, traditionally, all those things. So I'm going to keep this on for the talk. And I hope, have you got your photos? Great. Okay. So this, when I prepared this talk, I realized that we've actually been doing this for 9 years, not 5, as it said in the abstract. And just to give you some context, the civic organization is called Friends of Bathurst Nature, and it actually used to be called Friends of Waters Meeting Nature Reserve. It started in 2016 with the intention to support, primarily through fundraising, but also through citizen efforts with alien clearing, etc., the Waters Meeting Nature Reserve. And that was the intention with which we set out. But we encountered some problems, challenges, I think they like to be called, and we tried to work within the ECPTA guidelines, and to some extent we had some success. We organized some very successful hikes in the nature reserve, but there was always this push and pull with the citizen participants who wanted discounts to go and walk in the nature reserve, and we struggled for 4 years to get some sort of contract established along the lines of the Friends of Grindal, and we just didn't quite cut it for numerous reasons. And so at the same time, another part of the complex system was that Elizabeth's husband died, and so in 2018 she really wasn't able to lead the organization much, and it went through a bit of a lull, which is quite normal for volunteer organizations. And you've spoken about cycles before. So that's just kind of the human and bureaucratic context. And from that, we decided that rather than struggle with bureaucracy and contracts, we were going to just do what we could and use the enabling constraints of the system, which was that we had no money. We had almost no human resources at the time. But what we did have was a burning sense that Thicket was under-recognized, it was underappreciated, it was undervalued, and that the people who know or knew that Thicket was important were the people that we didn't already need to tell, you, basically. But that the people who were living and working and farming and gardening and building houses in Thicket didn't recognize that it was special, they didn't know that they didn't even see it. They just went in with a bulldozer and cleared the plot for their house that they were building, planted maybe some agapanthus and had a big lawn, and that was it. So we decided we needed to do something about that. And so we did what we could. We had no budget. We organized a free venue. Some of you have been to that free venue, and it in many ways was terrible, but it was free. And we had talks. And for 5 years, we ran a talk every month on the first Saturday of the month about something to do with nature. We've had talks about space. We've had talks about bugs. We've had talks, so many talks. Many of the people in this room have actually talked for us more than once sometimes. And we had, on average, between 20 and 60 people coming to a talk once a month for 5 years. And always we just kind of went on about Thicket, and people went, what's that, where is it, why is it, blah, blah, blah. And we had the same souls like Alistair and Mike Powell come back and explain. So we just didn't give up. We also did walks. So we've had mushroom walks, we've had orchid walks, we've had tree walks, we've had spider walks, we had walks when we could organize them, when we could manage the capacity to look after people's children and have a first aider and all that kind of lovely stuff. And we didn't give up. Sometimes we did 1 walk a year, sometimes we did 4 walks a year, but we just didn't stop. We went every year when we could, we went for a walk and we showed people what thicket was, where it was, what it smelled like, what it felt like. The other thing that we realized was that gardeners, particularly in Bathurst, but in other places like Kenton-on-Sea and Kleinemonde, they didn't recognize what they had on their properties. And sometimes these are very established gardens, have been there for 20, 30 years, and they had a lot of emotional links with people's grandparents and their, where they came from in other provinces, and there was all kinds of layers in these gardens and on people's properties, even on their farms sometimes. There were all these stories that we started hearing, and we went into people's gardens and we told them what they had, and we pointed at things and said, this is amazing, this is a scadoxus, and look how old it is, and look how many babies it's made over the years because you've just left it alone and you haven't weed-eated it to death. And people started to get excited about the things they had, and they started to look at books and recognize the plants in their gardens and realize that they were special in some way. But we also gave some thought, to information availability, because it's quite hard if you don't know anything about thicket. It's hard to find good information. And we linked up where we could with people who had resources for various reasons and who were motivated for various reasons to share information. And it was still really difficult because we just couldn't get good information. So we moved on with the help of these marvelous people, and we made a book. And it was, in some ways, a terrible book because it wasn't properly, a botanist would have nightmares about this book because it wasn't properly defined, and we just randomly picked things we had nice photographs of, and we put them in the book. But they were things that were growing in people's gardens and on the roadside, and they recognized them. And we gave them names that weren't Latin, that they could pronounce, and that they could, my grandmother had one of those in her garden in Pretoria, or whatever. And then they were identifiable. But the other thing that you've got to keep in mind is the human resource limitations that we were working on. We had like 4 people doing this for 5 years. So we just did what we could. But we didn't give up, and we didn't stop. And I when we started feeling tired, I remembered all those thicket trees you were talking about that just keep trying again and trying again and trying again and refusing to be beaten by all of the things that happen to them. And we also, 3 years ago, started to do this. So Bathurst has quite a small economy. It's quite dependent on tourism. And there are many festivals in Bathurst, but actually most of them are pretty much of a muchness. You come, you eat in the restaurants, you buy some things in the local shops, and you go home. And you stay in the local B&Bs, and you maybe engage with the environment. But we wanted to do something different, and so we made a Thicket Festival where people come, they listen to talks, and many of the people in this room have given really amazing talks. They play music, thank you, Franco. And we use the power of social media because it's cheap, it's available. You don't have to be in Bathurst to help with social media. And the Thicket Festival, we are now getting feedback from places like Mexico about they've heard of us, they wish that they could have such a thing for their whatever version of thicket the botanists can tell me that you have in South America. And it's quite exciting to get that feedback because really we're still a tiny organization. And we did everything on the cheap. We still do everything on the cheap. For 8 of the 9 years of our existence, we didn't have a bank account. Everything was cash, everything was donations. People paid for stuff, they donated their time, they helped us out. Our designer, who makes these beautiful posters, works for free because we tapped into that love of something. And another trick that we learned is that you should start where people are. Start with what they're already interested in. If they're interested in music, bring them into the thicket. If they're interested in gardens, bring them into the thicket. If they're interested in livestock, bring them into the thicket. Whatever they're interested in, start there. Don't try and tell them what you think is interesting. Tell them what they think is interesting in a thicket context. We did all kinds of things that didn't work. So we tried this. We tried to make, during COVID, because people couldn't go to the nature reserve, we tried to make an urban tree trail. This has been a dismal failure. Nobody uses it, but it's on Google Maps if you want to look for it. The trees are all still there, so you can go and look at these trees. We tried information posters and pamphlets, and one of the things that I'd like to share is that you need to tell people where thicket is. That's why this lurid pink is on this map. Because thicket is it's so vague. People don't understand it. They don't identify with it. So you need to make it really obvious that this is our special thing, that people like to be special. The other thing we did was we were full-on opportunists. This was a civil engineering road sign, and it was vandalized. And then we vandalized it again, and we made a little map. But also, again, we just don't stop talking about, this is Albany thicket, but fortunately this thing needs a facelift anyway, because it's a bit sun damaged, so we'll be changing that to whatever you decide on tomorrow. But again, the power of social media to share photos. There is an Instagram handle, Albany Thicket. It's got amazing photos. I don't know who's loading photos on there, but they're brilliant. So, and this has created a lot of curiosity because there's no explanation. There's just a map of the historical landmarks in Bathurst with the road names, and that's it. And people are curious, and so they go to hashtag Albany Thicket, and suddenly they discover that they're living somewhere they didn't even recognize. We also tied into people who are interested in birds. Birds are big. So we made a bird list with the community. We have WhatsApp groups for every occasion in Bathurst, and we have a bird group, and the bird group put this bird list together. And we made another picture of some of the birds, and this is at a busy intersection on the way to the township, and people's kids going to school and back, they're like, oh, I've seen that bird, and then they have a conversation about it with their grandfather or with the taxi driver or whoever's with them, and it makes a difference. Everyone in Bathurst knows this sign, but it's not on the main road. It's on an internal road that's on the way to the township where most of the people in Bathurst live. We've also got an amazing residents association. 10 years ago, they were defunct, but now they are very engaged with our environment, with improving things, again, because we've got very little money. We don't have much of an economy, but we use that as an enabler. And so they publish all these kinds of information about what is going on in our natural environment, whether or not it's a good thing. Of course, it's biased. Everybody's biased. And they share information about things like invasive species. And this is one of the areas where I'll get to the slide, wrong way, shortly. One of the other amazing resources we have in Bathurst is we have several resident artists. We've got a number of art galleries, I think 4. For a small town, that's quite a lot. And Sandra Thomas, who's recognized by the National Gallery, she's now moving to Elgin, but she's been based in Bathurst for 10 years, and she's produced really amazing thicket art, which is internationally recognized as an investment. So we've kind of piggybacked and gotten her at the Thicket Festival once or twice, and we encourage people to go to her gallery. And then also there is a local artist, her name is Tori Stowe, who has about 5,000 followers on Facebook. And she's quite a character. But you'll see that she refers to serious people with no sense of humor are very proud of our indigenous thicket. And she says, I have no idea why. It's 98% thorns, 4% rocks, and the rest of the percent's beauty and charm. But she does beautiful art of plants. She's an inspired gardener. She's very involved in developing it's not a botanical garden, but we are building a Bathurst public garden on a historical site where one of the 1820 settler families made a public garden. So the village is not restoring, it's rejuvenating this garden. And she is very involved with that. And every time she posts one of these rude comments about thicket, 5,000 people see it. So we are very happy that she wants to be provocative about it. And we have now, since last year and our transition to Friends of Bathurst Nature, we have started to collaborate more and not try to do everything ourselves. So we're collaborating with the University of the Third Age in Port Alfred, and they have a membership of about 25,000 people, which I still can't believe. And so people like Yapi have come to do talks for them, and that is our strategy going forward, because organizing talks every month got a little bit onerous. And we are encouraging our local gardeners to make Thicket visible. We've had the Kenton Garden Festival, we've had the Port Alfred Garden Group, Bedford Garden Festival started talking about Thicket this year. And although our commonage around Bathurst is threatened at the moment by mining, it is very encouraging to us to see how much recognition of indigenous thicket species there is, discussion about it. It's not an aloe, it's a gasteria. People are taking photos, they're planting them in their gardens, and with a bit of support and I think just continuing to not give up, I think that we'll get increasing traction. One of the things that was most inspiring for us recently was that Pam Golding has started to use indigenous thicket gardens as a desirable value add on the property that they're advertising in places like Kleinamanda and Kenton, because it's resilient, it's drought resistant, you don't have to maintain it very much, and at last it's starting to make it into the desirable garden category and get some recognition. So even though we don't take all the credit for that, we do feel that we made at least some contribution to getting that to happen. So that's it from me. And if there are any questions, very briefly, we can take them.